you is kind, you is smart, you is important. Affirmations, manifestations, do they actually work?
Sometimes it is definitely harmful.
Do you know the truth behind affirmations and manifestations? Stick around and find out what the studies are actually showing. Today we have for the first time panelist Dr. Onika Noel, specializing in neurology. We have back with us Dr. Tamara Black, our trauma specialist and marriage and family psychologist, and yours truly, Dr. T, HBC founder and OBGYN. Thank you for joining us, and be sure to click subscribe. We all know affirmations are trending, right? And apparently, you guys may or may not be familiar with this, but apparently there was a trend specifically on TikTok called the Lucky Girl Syndrome. I'm not familiar with this, but I'm going to share it because I read about it. Apparently on TikTok, this particular trend sort of took off and had over 195 million views. So what is this trend? The trend was basically that you said you were lucky. And basically believing that you were lucky resulted in good things happening. This trend took off even further in this current year, where people were starting to post more and more about these positive affirmations, reinforcing positive affirmations even in our kids, changing the next generation with the anticipation that by saying these affirmations, that it will then follow by certain behavioral changes, and simply we get what we want. So are these things true? First of all, let's dive into what exactly are affirmations.
When we consider affirmations basically started out as a kind of pop culture theme and was really integrated in some types of therapeutic interventions as well. So when we think about affirmations, there are basically statements or sayings that has a more uplifting or more neutral or positive tone. And it's actually meant to actually decrease or change your current negative state emotionally. But when we think about its use outside of the therapeutic frame, that's when we actually get a little bit murky in regards to its toxic use at times and misplacement of using a tool that may be good in certain situations, but also may be negative in certain other situations as well.
I will definitely say when the trend started for me, I felt like, oh, this is great. We're finally starting to say, especially for women of color, because we're so frequently told the opposite. You know, we're constantly told by society, you're not beautiful, you're not smart, you're not successful. And so for specifically, of course, it applies to many other groups, but for me, for women of color, specifically Black women, I like this trend. But then I started to see this trend start to go to another level. And it became less about really making behavioral changes and more about doing something cute for social media. You mentioned also that the intent initially was to sort of counter negative thoughts. Where do negative thoughts come from? Do we naturally think negatively?
In regards to where does negative thought programming come from? I like to actually highlight that word programming because we actually learn how to perceive ourselves and also how to perceive situations. So we all have different schemas and different reinforcements and really interpretations based on our upbringing, based on our experiences. And we actually bring those etymologies, those experiences, those kind of framings to certain other situations, whether it's in relationships, whether it's really understanding your current environment. We all have our internal dialogue. But when we think about negativity and how we think about ourselves or our external environment, that usually comes from similar situations or similar feelings and how we actually dealt with those situations and feelings at the time they were first generated. For instance, if there's a propensity to devalue yourself, usually you've had that example being devalued by a caregiver or someone or a parent. So I learned to actually devalue myself. I learned my self-worth and self-image based on how I was treated, based on the model that was before me. So if I don't feel good, if I don't look good, if I'm not really valued, that is an indication that that has been experienced previously and just wasn't really generated in the moment.
Wow, that's interesting. And definitely I can speak to the fact that even as you grow older, a lot of these negative programming, as you said, I like that phrase, becomes sometimes even more intensified, especially in our careers. So, Dr. Noel, not only are women of color few in medicine, and certainly fewer are Black women, but you're in a field where even women in general are few. So do you use affirmations? Do you use manifestations as a way of countering some of the challenges that you may have?
So at one point I did. I, as you alluded to, it's very difficult to be a woman in medicine, to be a Black woman in medicine and all in every factor. And then being in a very male-dominated atmosphere, speaking of some of that negativity that gets sort of fed into you, you already come in feeling um, like, you barely made it in, other people should have been here instead of you. Um, and the way a lot of surgeons speak is actually reinforce negative things. So nobody actually tells you when you're doing anything right. They usually tell you more so when you're doing something wrong. And so you start to like, overcorrect or, even start to wonder like at every given step, am I doing something that's going to cause me to receive any kind of negative feedback, right? And so I found that was affecting my performance, and actually at one point had to start writing down things on my wall before I left that I looked at that, were like, I'm a good surgeon. I'm getting better every day. Like those types of things. And I think it's important, sort of what we talked about earlier about, what is the context of these positive affirmations? It wasn't just like, well, I'm going to be making $3 million a year type of affirmations. They were very much centered at combating the things that I was receiving on a daily basis, and I had to figure out, well, what was being told to me, what was truth, and what is actually fact, and then replacing it with facts that I know to be true. Um, and it was very helpful for a time, just at least to sort of like remove those negative voices that were very loud.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I forgot that aspect of surgery. The fact that you're right, the culture is very much, there is no positive reinforcement. It's built on negative reinforcement. It's kind of like the survival of the fittest, who can withstand that type of atmosphere. And then you end up hopefully in your career, but even in your career, you still sometimes are challenged by that continued culture that no one seems to have an issue with, or at least is trying any mass effort to counter. But that's a whole other conversation. And as you ladies have pretty much mentioned, these positive affirmations are supposed to be countering a lot of these negative experiences and negative thought pattern. And there are some studies that show that there are some immediate benefits. Because the question with a lot of the studies is there any long-term benefit to doing these affirmations? What made you realize that there was a turning point that you no longer needed to do that? And why did you stop doing the affirmations?
I think it was very much, it wasn't a conscious decision where I felt like, okay, I'm done with this now. I don't need it anymore. I feel like it was very context dependent. While I was in the thick of it, while I knew I was receiving a lot of that negativity, and I didn't necessarily feel like I had, you know, enough inside of me really to fight it. I felt like I had to keep constant reminders that this was not this is not reality. What somebody else is saying, what those things are repeating in my head, that's not actually fact. And it's amazing how easily it comes back to you even after you say like this is not real. And I think once I started to have overall a better coping mechanism of my environment, I didn't necessarily need to say these things on a daily basis because I was walking into my environment with a different attitude, and I was more so relying on I say like just myself, but just it was less about what everybody else is saying and more about what am I going to get accomplished today, or what do I need to get done.
Mhm.
And I made that transition. So even now thinking back of like, the time where I had to literally write things on a wall, I don't necessarily feel the urge to do that. There's still negative voices around me,
Mhm.
but I don't feel that urge. And I don't think it would be as helpful for me now. At least I don't think so.
That's interesting. Dr. Black, what are the studies really saying about these long-term efforts? Do they really actually work for
Sure.
us?
So I think there's two parts, and I love what was just stated, because it is context dependent. And what you were really reflecting on is a very unvalidating environment. And there's a part of you that had to actually go in to self-validation. And as human beings, it's very natural for us to actually scope out of our environment. And this begins at a very young age. We survive off of one another, and we can't really live without one another. So when we think about human connection that often needs validation, it is very emotionally depleting when you don't have enough within to actually counterbalance the negativity and the false self statements that may be modifying your own image. So there are times where we have to actually go in and really reinforce that voice within us in order to counterbalance and survive emotionally certain environments. But in regards to the research is still ongoing. But so far, there is scientific research that has found that is based on, number one, the individual, and number two, it depends on the environment. There are certain individuals that lives in more stressful environments that actually decreases the ability to actually reinforce the positivity or the affirmations that's being stated. And said another way is that there's a difference between belief and speaking and thinking. And a lot of individuals are using affirmation to change their belief system. And you can say it, any statement, over and over and over again, but the misuse is saying it and using it as fake it until you make it, instead of saying it to actually really believe it and receive it. And once you believe it, you no longer need it, because
Oh,
your
wait.
belief
I need you to
system.
pause right there. Hold up. Wait. So, what I'm hearing you say is that there's a difference in just the habit of repeating words that are kind of empty in a way, meaning you just repeating out of a habit or repeating out of trend, versus actually intentionally saying these words with the effort of changing your behavior, your belief system. Am I understanding it correctly?
Absolutely, yes.
That's interesting.
Because there is a part of our brain, the reticular formation, that actually seeks out, right, confirmation biases.
Mhm.
So when you have a deep internal, even unconscious belief that I'm not good enough, that I'm othered, I'm less than, then we actually search out unconsciously things that validate that. And then that actually brings up fear and actually reinforces insecurity. But when we think about the belief, how you change belief is by identifying those injuries, those learned kind of statements, behaviors, biases, whatever is surrounding that insecurity, and you begin to uproot it. It's more than just repeating statements, because you're going to forget it, it's going to fall off, right? But it is useful at times, but there has to be deeper work as well. So it's really about changing the belief system that is connected to producing the automatic negative thoughts.
Wow. So that is why you were mentioning that in certain cases, it's really more effective as a part of therapy as opposed to just a social media practice. because there's work that has to go behind it. And you're right, sometimes if you hear like an empty compliment, like a compliment that you don't really believe, you don't really accept it, right? Mm-hmm. Someone says, like, I remember this guy once said, I was wearing my tore up shoes to work that particular day, my rundown shoes, and he was like, oh, your shoes are beautiful. And I was like, now that's a lie. Right? So you're right. We don't really accept these kind of empty compliments. So I guess it's kind of the same thing. If I'm saying something but I don't really believe it, it does nothing. Whereas if I'm actually utilizing it for behavioral change, then it actually can lead to some positive outcome. The extreme of that, I consider to be more the manifestation trend, where the manifestation is sort of like, it's not really necessarily something about you, it's something about calling something to happen in the world for you, which I see different. Does the manifestation trend, whereas people are doing things like, I'm going to be a CEO of major 514 company, and people are trying to manifest certain things to happen in their lives, which is not necessarily the act of trying to reinforce positive thinking about yourself. Does manifestation have the same impact?
So I feel this was such a good conversation, because I think from what Dr. Black said, it lets me know why certain things worked for me and why certain things didn't. And thinking about the manifestation, I think it kind of even falls in the same, it has similar types of pitfalls. Again, if it's this big, broad, general thing, it's not like something you're working toward. It's something that you're just kind of putting out in the air to say, hey, well, I hope I win the lottery. Let me bring this to my life. Just, being a single woman, like, well, you need to manifest that partner into your life. But it's something to be said about putting yourself out there, or doing the steps that it takes to actually, meet another person, right? And so it's like, well, how are these manifestations actually showing up in your life? Along the same lines, one of the things that I was talking to a friend about that fundamental belief. She's like, she had to stop believing that she would never meet anybody, that there's nobody else out there, right? And then once she said she got rid of that barrier, it was then easier for her to meet people, because she kept seeing opportunities in different places where she wouldn't have necessarily seen opportunities. So again, what we might be seeing as manifestations might be something else going on that's deeper, when it does actually work.
And that's really good, because when we consider that kind of changing the belief, our mind actually shapes and either shrinks our world and possibilities, or it actually widens it. And our belief system actually really changes what we see and what we don't see. So if there's a belief that it would never happen for me, you will unconsciously seek out situations and people to actually validate that unconsciously. And so once you actually just lift that burden, that possibility, you do begin to see more changes. It changes your eyes, because we don't see with our eyes, we see with our mind. And if you could change your mind by the kind of breaking down the limitation, because that's what non-belief is. That's when all the never, always, those are constrictions. So you are actually placing your mind in a limited, I would say, frame to actually really restrict it from actually receiving what you want. And we all know in life we don't always get what we want, right? But in regards to manifestation, there are many people are using manifestation in so many different ways, and it's different than faith. And it matters in regards to how the person is using it with affirmation. I will be loved, I will be married, right? And saying it 100 times per day. Or are they using their faith, their religion, or they're using it in a different way? There's so many different ways. But what I find is that sometimes it is definitely harmful, because it does what is called wishful thinking, and it minimizes accountability. So I can just speak what I want, but
Mhm.
I want to lose 20 pounds, but I'm gonna wish it off.
Right. I'm not going to the gym. I'm not going to change how I eat.
Right. And that's
Yes.
just a basic example. So I
Similar
do
to those people who are praying to God to remove the calories from the food they're about to consume. Yeah.
I haven't tried that one yet. Maybe I should.
I literally had someone pray that. And I was like, what? You mentioned that we see with our mind. I love that you said that we see with our mind. Do our words and perhaps even more so our belief system affect the actual structure of our brain? So, because there's some belief that, or some studies that I believe that the actual practice of affirmations, for example, actually has a impact on your mental health, or the implication is that there's some type of physical impact on our mental health. Is there a connection between the two, the structure of our brains and our thoughts, our emotions, our belief system?
I'm curious how much of it is the actual affirmation and the practice of mindfulness, which we do know does have an effect on our mental health, our physical health. And so, and I think that's why it's important for us to really define these things and really go in depth and figure out what is it actually that you're practicing. When you do say certain affirmations that are very specific, when you take pauses and you move with intent, that might be something complete. It might not just be the affirmation. It might just be the particular pause that you're taking to be in the moment, and to meditate. So I'm curious if some of this has to do with mindfulness.
Yes.
That's a great point.
No, I love that, because you bring up the space to really consider how does mindfulness actually impact the body, and what is the difference between that and manifestation as well as affirmation. And there is a lot of studies in regards to the neurological benefits, the biology and the physiology that actually changes, especially when it comes to the neural pathways in the brain. Words have power, and it does actually change the way that your neurology actually presents and actually work together. And what I mean by that is if you actually think about the connection, the neural networks in the brain, it does impact different parts of the brain because we have 4 different lobes of the brain, as many people know. But when there is negativity that constantly reinforces the pathway, it does change the structure, which does have an effect on the physical body. So we actually see cortisol levels actually go up. We see because of stress, but we also see it actually affecting your physical health, such as the expression of certain genes that's passed down through family, certain cancers. There is no separation between the brain and the body. And when we think about mindfulness, it's putting you back into your original state of being and being in the present. When we think about being overly positive and having affirmation, you're pushing yourself forcibly out of a uncomfortable, such as a sadness or even being upset. Those emotions are there for signals. They're not enemies, they're friends. They're telling you this is what we need to acknowledge. Acknowledge it, don't push it down so your body doesn't have to express it. Whatever you don't express out of your mouth, in a healthy way, of course, your body actually expresses it for you, whether it's headaches, tension in your back. So there is so much research in regards to the brain and body.
I love that you mentioned, oh my gosh, that's so good. I love that you mentioned that whatever we don't express verbally, or don't acknowledge, our body don't lie. I mean, it is a true teller, listen, to a fault. And so, yeah, a lot of people have these physical manifestations. We know that depression, for example, can present as more somatic symptoms. So there is a body of literature that has shown that there is a connection between the two. And so why wouldn't your thoughts, why wouldn't your emotions have some impact, and vice versa on your actual brain structure? So knowing that we see that stress has an impact on literally every single organ system. So that's such an amazing point. So it sounds like we're saying today that yes, affirmations in certain contexts, I love that we brought that out, in certain contexts actually can have a positive impact on your mental health, on your belief system, and then ultimately lead to the outcomes that you're looking for, that you're seeking. And I love the fact, Dr. Black, that you also touched on the suppression of your true emotions, your truth, I should actually say, the suppression of your truth, which I think some people feel a little resistance of doing that, of suppressing their truth. And I love that Dr. Noel mentioned that in acknowledging her truth, she was able to create a behavior pattern that helped her through a toxic environment or toxic situation. So I love the fact that we're also saying, acknowledge your truth. Your truth is safe. And that point about, we are so fearful and unwelcoming, I should say, of fear, unwelcoming of sadness, unwelcoming of disappointment, all those emotions that we're meant to have, like they exist for a reason. We're meant to have those emotions. It's just making sure that we have them in a healthy way. But it's okay to be fearful. It's okay to have some level of anger. It's okay to, I call it righteous anger. It's okay to have those emotions and acknowledge them. And then you can use your affirmations to work through that, as opposed to using your affirmations to subdue those. So I oh my gosh, you guys, listen.
I think that's exactly the point. The context in which you use it. I love the point about emotions. I think that's probably one of the single best things I've done in my adult years. It's just to and I tell people just I let myself feel how I feel. And some of these emotions they can be shameful. Okay. They're not cute. They're not always, I feel angry because this person spoke, I could be feeling jealous about something, but every time I feel like I tell myself I'm not allowed to feel something, it comes out in another way, right? Or, it shows up in my dreams, my back, all of the things. And so I give myself space now to feel how I feel no matter what, because it's the only way I can figure out what it is that's causing that emotion and then get to the source a lot quicker. Because, once I feel it and I'm like, okay, I know why I feel this way. Mm-hmm. Okay, this makes sense. Okay. Either I'm going to go into it and say, well, you know what, this is irrational because, you're worried about XYZ and that really isn't the case, and I can soothe myself a little bit better. Or I can say, yeah, okay, I see why you felt a little jealous about this person because you're not here yet. And, that's okay because you're going to get there when you get there, and I can
love
actually,
that.
work through it as opposed to fight
I
myself
love that.
on a daily basis. So
is that, I feel like that's my current process. I feel like in my last decade that I've been a lot more sincere about acknowledging my emotions and my feelings. And they're really assessing, girl, why do you feel that way? Like I have full blown conversations. Girl, why do you feel that way? Okay, let's trace back the root of this, and really proactively working on those things. And I don't know if it's a result of just the natural maturation process, or whether it's a result of us feeling, or especially as Black women, feeling like now I'm worthy of this space, because there's so much conversation about this now, about giving ourselves these safe spaces, having these conversations like we are currently. And it may be a combination of two. Maybe now that I'm seeing more women practicing this actively, and my natural maturation process of wanting myself to be a better person. Like as you get older, you literally start to be like, I want to be a better person. I want to not be so triggered by this. I want to work through my emotions. I literally have a desire to do these things. And then I notice also I distance myself from persons that are kind of toxic and kind of stuck in their process. So I definitely will say, for me, that's been my journey. I love what you just said, Dr. Noel, the fact that you're giving yourself space to this. And I hope moving forward in this new year that people actually actively do that. Give space to your emotion. Why are you feeling this way? Especially when I realize I feel a way about someone and they didn't do anything. Why are you mad? Why are you uncomfortable? Like, because clearly it's not them, it's something internal that, and I love going back to what Dr. Black said, tracing those steps, tracing those, I don't know what movie I was watching, but it comes to mind, these red thread. Somebody tell me what movie that was, but connecting the red threads in our lives, connecting, what happened in my childhood, what experience did I have that is the root of this emotion, and then working through that experience and correcting that experience by acknowledging it and doing some work, whether it's affirmations, whether it's sitting on someone's couch, to really do all of that work. Such amazing conversation. I love this. I love starting out the top of the year with this type of work, with this type of thought process. And I feel like if we kind of figure these things out, we have way more success in our personal lives, in our romantic lives, as Dr. Noel said, finding that partner is a lot of work on you, getting whole with you, and then finding that partner that's on that similar journey. And then professionally also, a lot of these concepts really get magnified, I think, especially in our professional lives, because professional lives tend to be so toxic sometimes, especially in certain careers, that it forces us to work on these things. So thank you, ladies, for joining the virtual couch. Dr. Noel, if they wanted to follow your journey in urology with your research and all the many things that you're doing, do you have a contact social media platform that you would like to share with anyone?
I'm on a pause.
You're on a pause socially?
Yeah.
I love that.
I take frequent pauses.
I love that. And Dr. Black, how can they follow you?
You can find my information on drtamalapractice.com.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And once again, I'm the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bum Club right here on YouTube with our growing community. So hello to all our new subscribers. We appreciate you following. And as always, you can find additional information on our Instagram account at healthybump.club. As always, we thank you guys for supporting us. Thank you for joining in on this conversation. Share with us, what are your thoughts about affirmation manifestations? Do you practice that? Do you experience imposter syndrome, as we were talking about earlier? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you guys, and we see you guys when? Next episode. And bye.